When Mel Gibson set out to make The Passion of the Christ, he wasn't just trying to shoot another biblical epic. Hollywood had moved away from grand religious spectacles decades earlier. Studios thought modern audiences didn't have the patience for slow spiritual storytelling. Add to that Gibson's decision to film in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin with subtitles, and industry insiders assumed the project was doomed before it began. Critics predicted it would be a career-ending misfire. But from the earliest days of production, it wasn't skepticism from the press that cast the longest shadow. It was the strange string of accidents, injuries, and coincidences that convinced some people the movie itself might be cursed. By the time filming wrapped, the cast and crew had endured lightning strikes, freak accidents, and almost biblical levels of suffering. For many, it blurred the line between fiction and reality. The most infamous story centers on Jim Caviezel, the actor chosen to portray Jesus. Caviezel threw himself into the role with complete devotion, but it seemed as if the universe, or something darker, threw everything back at him. In southern Italy, while filming the Sermon on the Mount sequence, Caviezel was suddenly struck by lightning. Witnesses say there was no warning, just a blinding flash and an ear-splitting crack. Caviezel survived, but his body jolted so violently that his hair was scorched and he temporarily lost hearing in one ear. Stranger still, only minutes earlier, the assistant director Jan Michelini had also been struck by lightning. That made two separate bolts, hitting two people in the same location within hours of each other. Michelini had already been hit once before during pre-production. 3 lightning strikes on 2 crew members connected to the same movie, an astronomically unlikely event. Some shrugged it off as coincidence. Others whispered it was an omen. The lightning was only the beginning of Caviezel's ordeal. During the scourging scene, where Roman soldiers brutally whipped Jesus, he was accidentally struck by a mistimed blow. One lash ripped straight into his back, cutting deep into his flesh. Caviezel later admitted the pain was so intense he nearly passed out, but the cameras kept rolling. Much of what made it into the final film wasn't acting. It was his body's real reaction to being wounded. In another sequence, Caviezel carried a massive wooden cross for hours of repeated takes. It weighed over 150 pounds, and with each stumble, the weight dug into his shoulder. At one point, he dislocated the joint entirely, leaving him with lasting injuries. During the crucifixion scenes, his arms were tied in unnatural positions for hours. Between takes, he shivered violently from pneumonia and hypothermia, brought on by the cold Italian winter. By the end of filming, Caviezel had endured pneumonia, hypothermia, a dislocated shoulder, a real scourging wound, and a lightning strike. He even suffered migraines so severe that some days he could barely see straight. Watching the finished movie, you can almost feel the authenticity in his performance. His agony wasn't just theater, it was captured suffering. Other cast and crew also spoke of eerie events. Monica Bellucci, who played Mary Magdalene, claimed that certain crucifixion days carried a heavy, oppressive feeling, as though the air itself weighed on the set. Extras reported seeing unexplained flashes of light in the sky. Sudden gusts of wind swept across the set in moments of silence. And there were endless technical malfunctions, cameras breaking, film stock ruined, generators failing with no clear cause. Jan Michelini, the lightning magnet of the crew, became a running joke to some, but others genuinely believed he was marked by the project. Being struck once is rare. Twice is nearly impossible. 3 times within the same film was enough to convince many that something unearthly was at work. Michelini himself laughed off the danger, but those who stood near him weren't as quick to volunteer to be in his shadow. Mel Gibson, ever the defiant director, refused to call any of it supernatural. Still, he acknowledged the production felt like a spiritual battle. He spoke often of forces that didn't want the story told. Crew members noticed his intensity, but many agreed. The air around the project felt different from any movie they'd worked on before. When The Passion of the Christ finally released in 2004, it became a phenomenon. It grossed over $600 million worldwide, making it one of the most successful R-rated films of all time. Audiences wept in theaters. Religious leaders debated its meaning. Critics argued over whether it was art or exploitation. But tucked underneath the controversy was the legend of its so-called curse. For some viewers, knowing what the cast endured only made the film more powerful. Jim Caviezel later admitted that the role cost him dearly. Physically, he never fully healed. He underwent multiple surgeries on his shoulder and still deals with chronic pain. Professionally, the film marked him in Hollywood. He went from rising star to a man many producers avoided, worried he was too closely tied to a controversial project. Caviezel himself has said he was prepared for that. In his mind, portraying Jesus was worth the price. The curse didn't stop with the rap party. The aftermath of the film carried its own share of strange echoes. Gibson's career spiraled after personal scandals. Caviezel struggled to find roles of equal stature. Rumors of a sequel, The Passion of the Christ, Resurrection, surfaced for years. But production delays and hesitation seemed to dog it at every turn. Some fans began to wonder if the curse extended beyond the first film, haunting anyone who tried to revisit it. It's easy to say this was all coincidence. Movies are chaotic. Sets are dangerous. Bad weather, illness, and accidents are part of the business. But it's also true that not every movie racks up lightning strikes, near-fatal injuries, and a reputation for being shadowed by something bigger. And this isn't the first time Hollywood has whispered about cursed productions. The Omen saw plane crashes, lightning strikes, and animal attacks. The Exorcist dealt with unexplained fires and sudden deaths. Poltergeist became infamous after multiple cast members died young. In each case, the accidents amplified the legend. The story on screen bled into the story behind the camera. What makes The Passion unique is how much of that suffering is preserved on film. When Caviezel stumbles under the cross, when his face contorts in pain during the scourging, when his body shakes on the cross, those are not acting choices. They are the real toll of carrying wood that dislocated his shoulder, of wounds that cut into his flesh, of cold so bitter it made him tremble uncontrollably. Audiences didn't just see a dramatization of suffering, they witnessed an actor breaking down under the same weight his character bore. For some, that makes The Passion more authentic than any religious epic before it. For others, it raises ethical questions about whether art should demand so much pain. But either way, the film's cursed reputation will always hover in the background. Nearly 2 decades later, the story of lightning strikes and injuries remains one of Hollywood's strangest behind-the-scenes tales. Was it divine interference, a curse, or just the brutal reality of making a movie under extreme conditions? No one can say for sure. What's undeniable is that the legend has become inseparable from the film itself. When audiences revisit The Passion of the Christ, they're not just watching a retelling of the crucifixion, they're also watching the scars it left on those who made it. The myth of the curse is stitched into every frame, a reminder that sometimes the line between storytelling and reality is frighteningly thin. And maybe that's what makes Hollywood's so-called cursed films so enduring. They suggest that the stories we tell about demons, death, or divinity aren't just safe entertainment. Sometimes they reach back and touch the people daring enough to bring them to life. If you want more deep dives into Hollywood's strangest legends, mysterious accidents, and cursed productions, comment, like, and subscribe for more.